Hi everyone, we're just going to let everybody in. I can see some familiar names. That's nice to see some familiar names. Brilliant. So I think we are ready to get started. So hi everybody, it's really nice to see you all on screen. Sadly, it would be even better to see you face to face. We are here to talk about the executive transition and why it's challenging, but not only challenging but critical to make the shift from doing to leading, and to gain some insights not only from myself and my colleague Bert, but also from our guests Christina and Stian too. So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Rachel. I'm one of the founding partners of Motion Learning. We're a global coaching business focused on creating positive change by providing coaching that's both high challenge and high supports. We believe we've got to mix the two of them together. My colleague is Bert, who is here today. So Bert, if I can just ask you to say hi to people.
Hello everyone, my name's Bert Stemarthe. I'm a senior coach with Motion Learning. I'm also a cognitive hypnotherapist and EMDR practitioner, and very much looking forward to today.
Thank you, Bert. Christina, can I bring you in to say hello to people, please? I'm really pleased you're with us today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christina Blahnik. I am the CEO of my family business. I joined it in 2009 and took on the role of CEO in 2013.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. And Stian, can I ask you to introduce yourself, because we'll be hearing from you too.
Thank you. I am Stian Westlake. I'm Chief Executive of the Royal Statistical Society, which is the UK's learned society for statistics and data science. I have been doing this job for just over 2 years now. And before that, I was a senior manager at an organization called Nesta, which is an innovation organization, and I've worked in other roles as well. Thank you. Really nice to be here.
Thank you very much. I can't believe you've been doing that role now for 2 years, Stian. That feels like it has absolutely flown by. Thank you ever such a lot. I know this is going to be a really good conversation. And before we get kind of stuck into it, I just want to confirm a couple of things. So firstly, just to let you know, we are going to record this and we will be sending out a recording to you at the end. We've got some time for questions, which you can direct either to me or to Bert or to Stian or Christina. Any of us will take questions at the end, and we'll be taking them from the chat. So if you don't mind just popping your questions in the chat box, then we will start referring to them towards the end of our conversation. If there's anything you do want to ask us, but because we're recording, you don't want to do it in a public forum, you can always reach out to either myself or Bert outside of this, and we can answer those questions in a more personal way then. So let's come on to today's topic, executive transition. So shifting into the most senior positions with an organization certainly isn't easy. And I know if any of you listening are in those roles, you will know that all too well. We hope that this time together will support you in either helping yourselves or others who are going through it. In our work as professional executive coaches, we're offered privileged insight into this time and the experiences of the individuals making this particular transition. Just on that note, I know I've mentioned the word transition quite a lot, and I'd like to make a really important point about the difference between what we call transition and what we call change. So change is an event. It's something that happens to a person, but transition is a psychological journey that we go on in response to the change event. So it's something that we experience. And in our work as professional coaches, we work with the experience of the clients. And so for today's topic, we're going to be focusing on some of the most common experiences that senior executives share with us. Their experiences of fear and their experiences of growth. So they're the two areas we'll focus on today. So let's begin with fear. It's a nice big word, isn't it, for a Tuesday lunchtime? One of the generally accepted purposes of fear is to keep us safe from danger. And while this can clearly be a good thing at times, it also suggests that top-level executives, when experiencing fear, are also perceiving some sort of risk or some sort of danger. From my experience, I know common fears that come up in my conversations with clients include concerns about, things like not having the correct team in place, not having a clear plan, not having a strategy or a strategy that can be articulated clearly. Or sometimes execs will talk about being anxious about not even having the right skills themselves. Can I actually do this top level executive role? I recall a really successful client of mine taking on his first group CEO role and confiding in me that he was really quite scared about even leaving his office. I asked him why, and he said, "Do you know what, Rachel? I used to be good at my job, but I'm not even sure what my job is now, let alone whether I'm actually going to be any good at it." So I'd like to bring Stian and Christina into the conversation here before we start kind of exploring and delving into this a little bit more. So Christina, if I can start with you, I know that you didn't take the classical kind of applied for the CEO role route. It was, I want to use the word gifted, not given, but maybe gifted to you. So can I ask you, how did you feel at the point you fully recognized you were there, you were in that role, and all eyes were looking at you?
Entrusted, I think is a better word.
Entrusted, not gifted, entrusted. I was thinking, what word can I use for it? Entrusted is a good one.
I think I don't even like the word CEO now anyway. It's such a corporate environment. I don't really inhabit that space, but I will, for the purposes of this and for the role that I have, it is that. I would say I recognized where I was as this leader when I was failing at my worst. And by that, I mean, I took the role on in 2013. It was just like, oh, okay, yeah, because no one else had the leadership role. And we'd gone from 6 people. And at that point, I think we were about 20. There needed to be a leader. When there were 6, there didn't need to be one. So I kind of took the role on. My mother was the MD. I then took it over from her. She was at an age where she didn't really want to take that role on anymore in a growing business. And it was fine. I just kind of got on with it. So yeah, leader, yeah, great. I can be on my ivory tower and throw down the lightning bolts and, completely misunderstood what leadership meant. And actually it was in early 2016, when everything was falling apart and we'd grown yet again. And we were, I think, just about 56 people. It was at a point where everything was falling apart. It felt like I was leading the Wild West. And that's when I realized, oh goodness, I've actually got a terrifying role here and a terrifying task ahead of me. So that's kind of, I would say it took me a few years to even get to the point of going, oh goodness, this is not a nice place to be where I am right now.
Oh, Christina, thank you. They're really important words. Felt like the Wild West, terrifying, and I can feel it. I can feel it coming through the screen. Now, the great news is, look, you're sitting there smiling, having grown and grown again. So you got through that period of time, which is great. Stian, can I ask you, what were your biggest fears when you took on the chief executive role?
I think I would say there were two things that I felt were sort of fearful when I started. The first, and this may just be a kind of an introvert versus extrovert thing, is it's just fundamentally a very social role. Being CEO, you're confronted with a new culture if you come into an organization from outside. You have to quite quickly work out lots of dynamics, not just business dynamics, but also social dynamics. And, you are just continually interacting with people, which I think for some people is absolutely their bread and butter and comes naturally, but for a lot of us is, not unbearable, but definitely is something that is has a first day at school feel, no matter how many times you do it. So that's a very kind of emotional thing. The other thing I think maybe a bit more logical is there's this immense pressure to figure stuff out quickly and take certain actions quite quickly. And I think there's a little bit of that, which is the sort of myth that we fall victim to, but a little bit of that, which is a genuine pressure. I mean, from the myth point of view, I think people make a lot of play of this idea of, the first 100 days of a leader, or the things that one has to do first of all. which for the most part, when I look at successful leaders, is not always the case. You know, I see a lot of people who do a really good job because they spend 18 months getting into a job, and then they really do good stuff once they've consolidated. So I think some of that is a kind of myth that we probably all kind of drink in. Having said that, looking back and sort of thinking about what I've done and what I've seen other people do, there probably is some stuff where you do actually have to make your mind up more quickly than you might otherwise like to about things. And there are certain actions that are much easier to take when you're a new leader and just become much, much, much harder to do if you bide your time for too long. I know, that sort of thing often relates to staff changes, working out who the right people in the team, who the wrong people in the team are. I know I did a restructuring not long after I started. I'm very glad I did that. And I certainly know other people in CEO roles who've said the same thing. Equally, some decisions become much harder to make if you leave them. You have a certain license to do things when you're new. Now, on the one hand, that's really good. On the other hand, it means that when you are starting in a role, there is that kind of pressure thinking, goodness me, I've got to quickly recognize patterns, work things out, and that creates a certain anxiety. Not necessarily an entirely bad anxiety, but it's definitely something that's there.
Thank you, Stian. It's really interesting, isn't it? I hear a lot about expectations, whether it's what I expect of you in that kind of first 100 days, or what I expect of you on your first day in the new school, or, what I expect of you in terms of, crikey, you restructured quite early. Did I expect that? Did I not expect that? We're going to build on some of these things today I'm going to hand over to Bert now, who's going to just talk about two different aspects of fear, which do crop up a lot in executive coaching. So this sense of a fear of failure. Christina, you said, actually it was when I was failing that I really started to kind of notice and feel like I was in the job. And also this idea of kind of negative judgment of others, whether it's based on their expectations of kind of what you should be doing right now, what we expect you to be doing. So, Bert, I'm going to hand over to you just to kind of take this a little bit further.
Thank you, Rachel. So fear, or any emotion, will be governed by perception, and to a large extent, beliefs, what we believe. In particular, limiting beliefs like I cannot fail or I must not fail, which raises the stakes of the consequences of failure. We're all familiar with the phrase catastrophizing. So this fear results from that perception. In this instance, I often say that we're turning failure into a saber-toothed tiger. So it's important to recognize that neither perceptions or beliefs are necessarily truths. Of course, some are not. The thing is that we turn them into truths. We turn what we believe into the truth. But it's crucial that we recognize them actually as just our perceptions and our beliefs. So fear of failure is not necessarily a bad thing. Like any emotion, the key to its efficacy, which is to communicate something to us, is the intensity of its expression. So I use a 0 to 10 scale a lot. And I ask clients to score their level of fear out of 10. Anything above a 7 out of 10 is likely to not be useful. Somewhere between a 2 and a 4 is ideal. In fact, I often say to people, imagine the last time you tried to have a lucid conversation with somebody who'd lost their temper. You can't. They can't communicate. So close to a 10 out of 10, and a process called, I'm sure you've heard of it, emotional hijacking takes place. Emotional hijacking, or cognitive inhibition, is where we lose access to executive functions in our brains, specifically the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logic, planning, sequencing, that kind of thing. And of course, it's useful if you're running for your life, being at an 8 or a 9 out of 10, but not if you want to reorganize a department or decide if you're going to buy another company or not. All right? So fearing failure at a, say, 2 out of 10 is not only not harmful, but it can be actually really useful because it's communicating the potential dangers, but it still allows you access to all of those wonderful faculties. So can I just ask, take a moment, Christina and Stian, to, when you look back, to score your fears. So Christina, you know, when in 2016, how would you score out of 10? What was going on for you in that time? And can you notice, say, how your fear may have been at an 8 out of 10 at times, or when it was, say, at a 2 out of 10 and it was useful?
Goodness, I mean, you're asking where I've kind of normalized 11 out of 10, I think, in the last few years. I think I'm high functioning. You know, I think any CEO that survived the last 2.5 years has lived at 11, and we have functioned. So I'm just going to put that out there. I think probably, though, I was operating at that point somewhere between a 6 and a 10 in that period. And it's quite a specific period of change where we did a big organizational review, and we scored, quantified and qualified, and that was then, it became an entire existential crisis. So it became very personal, because actually when you're at the top, there is no one else to go. It is you, you know, your role is you are the role. It's indistinguishable, especially in my particular situation. It's a family business. So there is nowhere to go. It's so, who are you? What culture are you building? It is your culture. And then you start to have this existential crisis, and you're going, well, what is my culture? What is me? Who am I? And how am I going to imbue that on, you know, now 250 people? So I think I've kind of normalized other people's 10s into my 6 or 7 now, but that's our jobs.
Yeah.
Well,
so you've recalibrated.
Yes.
You've recalibrated fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And was it specifically fear of failure?
No, it's not a fear of failure, because, you know, you talk about the fear of failure, you can turn into your truth. I actually would say that in full circle, challenging that fear turns it into a stronger truth, in terms of when you go, okay, why am I scared? What is it I'm looking at? How do I break this apart, challenge it piece by piece, and build a new truth? So actually I rewrite the truth, and that's how you then, you're still at the fear level, it's just you've rewritten it and hence recalibrated that fear down. It's still there though. So I kind of look at it slightly differently.
No, that's brilliant. Brilliant. How about you, Stian? What's your experience? What's your
I'm just trying to think back and remember what my numbers were back at that point. I don't think I was up at the top end of that spectrum. Doing things like restructuring and that sort of thing, there was things I'd done before in other roles, so that definitely helped me feel more in my comfort zone. I mean, there is an interesting question there about, you know, was I taking enough risk? You know, the fact that I wasn't having to manage myself down from kind of 7s, 8s, 9s on that fear scale. Did that mean that there was some tactics that I should have been entertaining, that I was shying away from because I was keeping myself in the sort of 3, 4 zone? So that's perhaps that's another interesting reflection I can make based on your question about fear levels.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks for that. And Christina, I think I love the idea of sort of recalibrating the fear, and also turning, you know, reframing your beliefs and and developing new truths, which is what we do in the coaching process. And that really is the transformation of coaching, taking something that is fearful and then turning it into something that's meaningful. So,
I mean, if I can just add to that, in the context of this conversation, it's one of my tools of recalibrating is coaching. And I will reach out to my coach when I know I'm tipping into an unhealthy zone, because it's not about making it go away. It's about going, okay, what is this? How can I rebuild this and create a new script around it? And I can't do that on my own. I need an objective voice who's a specialist in that to challenge me to go, okay, hold on a second. How can you reuse language and scripts to rewrite this?
Mhm.
And that, you know, that is, it's my survival mechanism is the executive coach, because I have nowhere else to go.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. But yeah, again, that reframing, that turning something that is challenging into learning. Learning isn't to be feared. Challenge isn't necessarily to be feared. But often if we just think of, oh, I cannot fail, if that belief is in place, I cannot fail, then we build the consequences around that failure into something that we need to run away from or freeze in the face of. And of course, you know, we can think this isn't new. You know, thinkers from Aristotle, Plato, Einstein have for thousands of years, you know, thousands of years ago, mused on failure, and some see it as essential to progress. So it's important that we reframe these things. You know, the bigger part of the work that I do with clients is first understanding where fear comes from, what's underpinning it, and then changing what is underpinning that fear. I may use an example of an Olympic high jumper about to jump is not thinking of failure. They're thinking about all of the things that they practiced to succeed. They may afterwards, if they have failed a jump, look back and think, okay, what did I do wrong? What do I need to do next time? But in that moment, they're just thinking, what is it that I practiced? How can I succeed? But thanks for those contributions. The second example of fear that I come across a lot is the fear of the negative judgment of others. What do people think of me? Now, people can be subordinates, peers, or other more senior colleagues. Again, we filter these judgments through our beliefs, and they become tigers to fight or flee from or freeze in the face of. And specific to the doing to leading transition, some leaders may worry about not being seen to be getting their hands dirty, and will then fear the judgment of those around them as a result. I can think of a recent example from my work where a senior leader of a global organization took on a more expanded role within the organization. And this brought about strategic responsibility for more of the firm's functions. And she really valued a half day in the week where she spent time thinking about strategy. However, when she was busy, which was most of the time, of course, this planning time would always be subordinated to whatever else was going on. So we spent time thinking and reflecting on the products of these half days. What did she get from it when she did it? The differences they made to her self-efficacy, and how good she thought she was at her job, and what that meant for her leadership presence. So these reflections altered and reframed the value of what she was doing, the value of these half days, and they ceased to be self-indulgent time off, she sometimes called it, and instead became really meaningful to her role. And I think it's important that the subordination of this thinking time, the lowering of it as a priority and the perception that it was just self-indulgent was because of the fear of not being seen to be doing. So therefore, getting stuck in was evidence to everyone around her that she was worthwhile, and that reduced her fear of their judgment. If that makes sense. So calibration of what doing is very important. A key part of a coach's work is to bring awareness that fear is in play, because it's not always obvious, and then to recalibrate it, as Christina was saying. So I help my clients to understand that there really isn't a saber-toothed tiger in the room, and to reduce the fear by framing the task at hand into something that's meaningful. And that, as I said earlier, is transformation. Turning something that is feared into something that's embraced as a challenge and is meaningful to the client. So I just want to make one last point, and that is there's a very, very subtle but very important difference between caring what other people think of us and fearing what other people think of us. It's the same with caring about failure or fearing failure. And that is, we don't have a fight or flight or freeze response to caring. only fear.
Thank you, Bert. I think that's really interesting. And thank you, Christina and Stian, for your contributions. We work a lot with leaders on their fears, such as the ones we've mentioned, which are certainly common topics. And we know when we feel nervous, vulnerable, or even fearful, a safe space to share those concerns confidentially is critical. So, Christina, thank you for talking about that being the point at which, you know, reaching out to your coach as your safe space is kind of your go-to place. Because professional coaching for sure is one of the key ways to take care of this particular executive need. We always recommend leaders and executive leaders are given a safe space to think, to feel, and to be whatever they need to, and to work on practical skills and techniques to help them as they transition fully into that new senior leadership role. So another key theme kind of extending from this that comes out of our work is this kind of link with the areas of learning, vulnerability, and growth. So we're just going to move now just to think about something slightly differently and think about growth. So Christina, can I just ask you again, what's your view of growth and learning in relation to the CEO role? What's your perspective of it?
Oh my goodness.
Small question.
Every day that I'm doing this job, I am becoming a better person for me, because of the very simple fact is that every day I need to ask myself, have I done the right thing? Could I have done it better? And that's not in terms of questioning or doubting myself, more of a, what have I learned from that? And it isn't something that you do once a year or you know, once a quarter or whatever. You do it every single day. And I think that's what's helping me become a better me, and it's never going to end. I wish it never to end. And I think, you know, it's all intertwined into the ego and the id. It is ultimately, you know, I'm not an object that is leading. I am a human that has feelings, and I am me. It's just, you know, the challenge of this role is that every day I'm asking myself, you know, was that the right me? Was that the wrong me? Could I be a better me? But that's the me part. Then on a role level, what I'm realizing that every single day I need to consider, is it now the right time to lead differently? And what is the different leader that I need to be? So there's lots of different leader hats that I need to put on at different points. And as our business has grown, you know, from 6 to now 250, I'm having to learn to be different. You know, I always wanted to be everything to everybody, and that directly linked to the moment that I started to realize I was failing because I was nothing to anybody. And that's when I went, okay, I've made myself redundant at the level that I was. I now need to rewrite who I am. I need to write my own job description and my own kind of identity in this position. And I'm doing that again and again and again and again. I'm in another cycle of it. And it's kind of going through the quadrants of, you know, conscious capability, or unconscious to conscious incapability. Then, you know, this cycle is never ending, and it's so exciting and it's so invigorating. But I also am aware, and I know that there will be stages where I go, right, lose all of my energy, all of my mojo. I can give nothing, and I know I'm at my unconscious, incapable stage of my cycle. And I know then, okay, I know this feeling. It will take me a certain amount of time. I need to address it, talk about it, and then I'll start going into the cycle of evolving. So there's a personal and a professional journey that leading is helping me evolve into every single day, and grow and transition. You know, it's a cocoon. I'm always every few years I'm a new cocoon.
Thank you. It's interesting you talk about wearing lots of different hats. I think we need to think about you wearing lots of different shoes for different.
Yeah, that too.
Stian, what about you? Thank you, Christina. What have you learned about yourself, and what have you learned about others as you've settled into your role as a chief executive?
So much, but you know, it's all kind of one of these where to begin questions. I think there's probably two particular things that I find myself continually learning about and exploring. And I guess you could think of both of them as sort of continual move on a spectrum, two different spectrums, but in each one it's working out sort of where I sit and trying to calibrate the right position. And the first of those spectrums is this question of, it sort of comes back to some of the things I think Christina was saying about how much I should be leading through other people and how much I should be doing myself. And I think certainly starting in the role, obviously there was a big push, or I had to really push myself to make sure I was doing enough leading through other people rather than doing things myself. But obviously that is something that's a judgment that I find I'm always having to make on a nuanced basis in every individual relationship that I have in the organization. There'll be some people who will want more guidance or want my greater involvement, and sometimes that will be the right thing to do, sometimes it won't. Some people who need more autonomy, and there will be some things where I do add value by actually doing something myself or spending the time to think about something. And there's the risk that there is a risk of giving too much of yourself to other people, so you lose your kind of internal time and agency. But working out how to manage where to sit on that continuum has definitely been something I feel I've got better at and had to learn. And then I think the other spectrum that I've found myself trying to get to grips with and understand is the spectrum between a sort of openness to new stuff, to experience, to projects, and the opposite of that is control, setting a narrative, articulating the narrative. And again, there is, I think, neither of those is neither end of that spectrum is the perfect place to be. On the one hand, certainly in the organization I run, we do lots of things, and to a certain extent, lots of things that we do is inevitable. This is not an organization that can that should be narrowing down to do one thing. And I need a certain degree of responsiveness to my members, who pay our membership fees and generate a lot of our ideas and what we work on, to be responsive to situations, to be responsive to ideas coming from my team. So responsiveness and openness is hugely important for what I do. On the other hand, there is a sense in which, as CEO, people do look to me for narrative. They look to me for simplification, for prioritization. And I know that if I basically just sort of say, I'm a kind of cardboard sponge or kind of post office for ideas, people find, that's not an entirely satisfying role for the chief executive to be playing either. So people do look to me to simplify, to reiterate messages. That sort of famous line about how when you communicate from a position of leadership, when you find yourself getting tired of the thing that you're saying, that's a sign that it's just about beginning to cut through to people. There's a certain sense in which you have to be persistent. And if your heuristic for whether you're for communication is, am I interesting myself, then you're probably not being persistent enough.
Thank you.
And so working out where to sit on that, I think, has been the other thing that I explored. But I guess the problem with both of these is the lesson is not really you need to be sort of 6.5 on this scale and 4.5 on that scale. But I feel I've learned more about how to maneuver there.
Thank you, Stan. That's really interesting. And you pick up for me on some really important points. So the sense of actually learning on the job, this sense that actually it's when you are doing the role that is kind of when the learning is really taking place. And you reiterate what Christina was saying about this idea that it is a constant, this idea that learning is a constant. And something also strikes me about the type of learning or the way in which senior leaders learn, which is in a very public view. It's like people are watching, eyes are on, eyes are watching. And that's quite challenging. Hey, I think that whole sense of learning on a job, it poses a question about how well we do support executives before they step into the role, how well we do support them when they are in that role and they are learning in a very, very exposed way. We agree that, our view of learning, that learning is a constant. It's a constant presence in transition. And it's one from our perspective that needs real sensitive understanding and support. So I'm going to hand over to Bert. And Bert, if you just take a couple of minutes just to talk people through a little bit to do with learning and how you would approach it with clients, that would be great.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to share my screen because I want to talk through this model, which I use quite a lot. The growth model may be familiar to some, maybe not others. But I often quote Carl Jung in my work, specifically when he said, if we do not make the unconscious conscious, then we accept our behaviors as a fact of life. So the way I rephrase that is, if we're not aware of something, then we can't change it. And I think the growth model is just a very good way of explaining the journey from to growth, and gives a sort of a palpable sense of what it is to be in the comfort zone. So I use this model to illustrate how doing often resides in the comfort zone because it feels safe. It gives a sense of control. But this model gives a really easy sense of what you need to do to get from there to the growth zone. The fear zone, really, really important to understand what is in there. So I get clients to populate this themselves. You know, the old maxim, a picture paints 1,000 words. So I ask clients to populate this diagram with their own comforts, their own fears, the things that they feel that they need to learn, and how they want to grow, and what growing will look like once they're there. Now, I did this with one client, and his comfort zone was populated with things that he had to control. As an entrepreneur and CEO, his vulnerability was all-consuming, and that may resonate with some people tuning in today. So he retreated to his comfort zone by micromanaging his team, and even doing the most mundane tasks, including clearing up after events that his firm organized. Now, it didn't surprise either of us because he had a less than ideal relationship with control, but doing these things kept him away from the fear zone. So he was looking inward at all of the things that he could control, the things that he was good at, the things that gave him comfort. So with him, what we did was we worked with surrendering control. It's interesting. I often ask or begin these conversations with the question, what does it mean to surrender control? And you can ask yourselves that question, but it's a really, really good place to start. What does it mean to surrender control? So moving on, we calibrated his fear of letting go by addressing what would actually happen if he didn't clear up empty bottles at the end of the night. He needed to learn and really connect with the abilities of his team, which incidentally in our sessions, he would constantly praise at how good they were. But when he was in the situation, he would naturally default to these other behaviors. Now, he has really grown as a leader. I mean, it began with me getting emails and texts saying, I've left the event early. And then he would tell me that he wasn't even going to some events as he was relying on his team to deliver. So he's really, really let go of that need, that urgent need to control. So I'm mindful that some people listening to this may think, well, of course, the CEO shouldn't be clearing up when they've got a particularly good team. But when it's your challenge, when it's your perceptions and your beliefs, sometimes you just need somebody to hold up a mirror to these things and then to show you the path away from those behaviors to more beneficial ones.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I think when we think about growth from an executive coaching perspective, it's our perspective that everyone has the opportunity to be constantly learning, but very few people have to do it in public, in full view of the way around them, the same way that senior executives have first, the same way as many people, whether it's a first CEO role, a first strategic plan, or a first entirely unpredictable situation, such as the ones that Christina, you noted we've experienced over the last couple of years. It's hard doing this in full view of others, isn't it? And it can lead to feelings of vulnerability. We will share the growth model that Bert's just talked through outside of this conversation. If you've got any questions about it, please do feel free to reach out to us and we will talk to you about how we use it. From our perspective, understanding the concept of this kind of comfort zone in real deal can be really, really beneficial and paradoxically quite comforting, which is really nice. Now, guys, we're very aware that we've got a couple of minutes here, and one of the things that we do want to do is give you just a chance to pose a couple of questions to either myself or Christina or Stian or Bert just before we kind of wrap up this time together. 45 minutes flies by when you're talking about things like this. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like us to answer? Have a little look in the chat. Joe Richardson says you were profound, Bert, at 13:25 this afternoon, so that's good.
Very kind, thank you. I try at least once a day.
I mean, Rachel, if no one's got any questions, there was something I'd like to add.
Yeah, that would be great.
Which is, I think that the secret of my success and getting through that growth model from, you know, the comfort through the fear is actually also the team that is around me. And what you know, I was very lucky to be able to build in a fairly short period of time, when it became clear that I couldn't be everything to everybody, was a very, very, very strong and tight senior leadership team around me. And we have spent years working together, becoming closer, and, you know, in terms of who we are and what we are. And that has given me the safety to publicly be afraid and grow with them, because they are buffering me in the space of, okay, they're giving me the space to be able to do that and protecting me from it going wider than my senior leadership team. And that is really, that is one of my strengths, is the team that is around me and the safety that I have and the trust that I have in them. And I think that has and is defining our business. And it's a cascading of values and a cascading of trust and belief, and, you know, teams rallying together to help each other. And I think I just wanted to kind of give a nod to that.
Yeah,
that it isn't just external help that is sought, it is also the safety net that you've created around yourself.
I think that sense, Christina, of that kind of network of safety, that network of support is really critical, whether it is your team, your peers, whether it is mentors. I know with lots of execs, we'll talk about mentors, who's mentoring you, whether it is somebody like a coach, a counselor. It's the combination of that support work network that's very powerful, isn't it? But you're right, your team, your peers, the people around you are critical.
Mm-hmm. Can I add something to that? Stian mentioned an heuristic approach earlier. You know, what is going on for me as a person in this moment, and I think, Christina, that idea of, you know, building that team around you at the same time as this understanding, this perception of belief, I can't be all things to all people, I think is equally powerful. That changing of belief, because it's such a powerful drive. Beliefs are such powerful drivers of behavior, that I can't be all things to all people. So both of those things, I'd say, were happening at the same time, which led you to the place that you got to. I think that's really, really important.
Thank you very much indeed. I can see a few questions coming through, so we will pull those off the chat before we close, and we will make sure we get the answers. I think, Stian, can I just ask, before I just close, is there anything that you would like to add, a final word that you would like to say?
Guess what, by way of conclusion, I'll just say it's been certainly I found it a tremendously rewarding experience, kind of what I've been working on and learning for the last 2 years. So it's a transition I'd hardly recommend to people, even though we've been talking about fear and challenge and those kind of things. I think they're all things that, as Bert was saying, that do lead to a lot of growth.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So guys, we're mindful of your time. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us, especially to Christina and to Stian for giving up your time today. I know that we think you're brilliant leaders, and we see the growth and learning and effort that you put into yourselves constantly. And so thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you too for everyone else for joining us. We're going to be sending you out some information. We can send you a copy of this webinar. We are going to be writing something for LinkedIn soon about the idea of a personal development board, a bench. So we will make sure we send that out to you too. We ask, please share what we give you far and wide. If it's helpful for you and you think it might be helpful for somebody else, please do share it. We'll be sending you some stuff about what executive coaching is and how an exec might know whether they are ready for it, it's the right time for them or not. And the final request is hook up with us, link in with us, and please do feel free to sign up to our newsletter. And you can keep in touch of all these different types of events that we do. But thank you, Christina, Stian, thank you very much indeed. I wish you all a wonderful week. Now it's stopped raining. Take care, everybody. See you soon.